Hey y'all, welcome to a Mindless Morning Show special interview. Sit back and relax with your hosts, Nick and Josh.
Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of the Mindless Morning Show. Today we have an extremely special guest. We have Howard Bloom. He's the author of several books. He's in the Space Steering Committee. He is one of, if not the best, music publicists of all time. How are you doing today? And thank you for
being here. Wonderfully, especially meeting you guys. So far, you've been lighting me up.
Yes, that's what we do. Yes, awesome, man. I'm
absolutely.
Yeah,
I'm ecstatic. I'm super ecstatic. So, I mean, there's so much to get into with you because as I was telling you before we started, I watched your documentary, The Grand Unified Theory of Howard Bloom, and it was I feel like it didn't portray enough of how amazing your life actually is and how much you've actually done in your lifetime. Like, and your outlook on life is so, it spoke to me, and I'm just going to say this. I really wish I was Amir.
That is fabulous because that's what I live for. You know, when I was 10 years old, I was the least wanted child in my hometown of Buffalo, New York. My parents had no emotional interest in me and no time for me. And other kids loathed me, despised me. I was only useful when you wanted somebody whose hat you could grab and throw back and forth over his head and humiliate him, or throw his book bag into a pile of dog shit, or, chase me around the block. I was good as a target, but I wasn't accepted as a kid. And one day I was sitting in my family's big living room, and there was a book on my lap. Now, the weird thing is, when you're 10 years old, you know the location of every single book your parents own because none of those books has changed its place since you came to consciousness. And this is a book I had never seen before. I have no idea of where it came from. And I opened it up and it said the first two rules of science are these: the truth at any price, including the price of your life. And it gave the example of Galileo, and it told the story all wrong. It said it as if Galileo had been willing to go to the stake in order to defend his truth. 30 years later, I would discover that wasn't true. But nonetheless, I needed the heroic vision. And rule number 2 of science: look at things right under your nose as if you've never seen them before, and then proceed from there. Look at things right under your nose that you and everybody around you take for granted, things that are invisible to you, and flush them into visibility, and then proceed from there. And it gave the example of Anton von Leeuwenhoek, the guy who invented the microscope. And all of a sudden, I had a reason to be on this planet. All of a sudden, I had a group of playmates who could not reject me. Why? Because Galileo, Anton von Leeuwenhoek, Albert Einstein. Well, Albert Einstein was still alive at that point. But the major heroes of science, these guys who were reaching out and saving my life, were saving it over a distance of 350 years. And if I wanted to tag around with them, they could not say no because they were dead. So
that's true.
A good way to look at it.
so that left me with an obligation. If they had given me a purpose in life, then my job was to reach out over 350 years to find the next poor, confused kid and give him or her a sense of purpose. So that's the obligation I've been stuck with, the mission that these two guys conferred on me. And I've been working on it with all my heart and soul ever since.
Well, I'll say you definitely achieved that, because in the time that, but by the time I was done with that documentary, I started going and watching all these different interviews with you, all these like not documentaries, but like little factoid clips about you. And then I started reading about your books, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to buy all these books now, because I feel I feel like you very well articulate what I have never been able to really like fully process as life. I love your theory, your idea of it, and the whole cycle of destruction for creation. Love it.
Right. With an emphasis on creation. Look, this universe is an extraordinarily destructive force. The universe gave birth to atoms. Then she gave birth to sons. And in the hearts of those sons, she tore the freaking little atoms apart. That's outrageous. And the screams of dying atoms are things we use every day. They're photons. They're bits of light. That's the light you and I think is gorgeous and wonderful. It's the scream of dying atoms. And then what did she do to the stars, which were astonishing creations? She killed them off one by one. They died. And Mother Nature has created, we think Mother Nature is warm and sweet and loving. One day on LSD, I was climbing a cliff naked with a bunch of friends. We had all just dropped LSD over breakfast. And then we'd gone down this 300 feet cliff, and none of us had any training in how to climb cliffs whatsoever. How we made it alive to the bottom, I don't know. But then when the sun began to go down after a full day on this black pebbled crescent beach in Big Sur, we started going up the cliff again to get back to the lean-to where we were staying. And I had this warm and fuzzy feeling on LSD, totally naked, that I was on Mother Nature's breast, and nature was going to take care of me. And guess what happened next? I reached out for my next handhold. I grabbed onto what looked like a sturdy little plant, and the plant came off in my hand and rocked me backwards just a half an inch. But that's enough to kill you. And I suddenly realized Mother Nature didn't care. Nature is the inventor of pain. Nature is the inventor of agony. Nature is the inventor of depression. And nature is the inventor of death. But there's a catch here. Humans have been dreaming of peace. I mean, we can prove it. We can go back to Isaiah, who talked about turning pruning hooks or spears into pruning hooks and swords into plowshares, right? Mm-hmm. We know he had a deep dream of peace. And we've all been dreaming about peace ever since. Well, guess what put that dream inside of us? Evolution. What's evolution? That's nature in action. So if nature gave birth to dreams like flying and peace and justice inside of us, then what does nature expect of us?
Right.
Nature obviously expects us to take those dreams and turn them from airy fantasies into absolute realities. And in fact, we've been doing it and we just don't recognize it. And until we understand how we've been doing it, we're not going to be able to live up to our full potential. What do I mean? If you were born in one of those blissful indigenous tribes where everybody lives in loving harmony with nature and loving harmony with their fellow human beings, your odds of dying a violent death at the hands of another human being are 10 times what your odds of dying that violent death at the hands of a human being are today. If you've been born in 1650 in the West, just before the Industrial Revolution, which is supposed to have destroyed us all, right? Supposed to be monstrous and devour humans. Your odds of dying a violent death at the hands of a fellow human being were also 10 times what they are today. In other words, we've increased the peace in the world by a factor of 10, and we don't even know it. We decry the 20th century as the most violent century in the history of mankind, and Western civilization's gross sins in killing off between those things and the experiments of Marxism in China and in Russia. A total of about 200 million people were killed through these means. But these are nothing. This is a tenth of what it would have been before the Industrial Revolution. Meaning that nature has planted these dreams of peace and justice inside of us and compassion, and they are coming true through us even without our knowledge of what we are doing.
So that makes it sound like things should eventually get better and better over time. But
there was a guy named Herbert Spencer, and at the time in the 19th century, he was considered absolutely the leading philosopher of his age, and he believed in something called progress. And then, because we had a whole bunch of, I hate to keep bringing up the Marxists, but we had a whole bunch of Marxist evolutionary biologists, especially Stephen Jay Gould, at the end of the 20th century. And they said, no, there is no inherent progress in the universe. They were wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, in the very beginning, there was nothing. If you and I had been sitting at a coffee table at the beginning of the universe, the three of us, and Nick, you're the dreamer in the bunch, the idealist, and you had said, I predict that any minute now, way over down there where I'm pointing, there's going to be a pinprick infinitely smaller than a pinprick that's going to contain the seeds of an entire universe. And I would say, Nick, you're absolutely crazy. We've been sitting here so long at this coffee table that we have drunk over 38,000 cups of coffee. And there never has been a pinprick infinitely smaller than a pinprick. There's never been a second or a minute to wait for it to appear. There hasn't been any time. And there's never been a universe. So you've got to be dead wrong. I mean, extrapolate from the past, man. Be realistic. Right. And all of a sudden, a pinprick infinitely smaller than a pinprick would come bursting out of the nowhere and would start unfurling like a giant's handkerchief at super speed, at millions of light years per minute. And it would be a giant unfurling sheet of space, time, and speed. And I would say, Nick, I don't know how you did it. This is insane. This shouldn't happen.
That's what I do.
And then you'd make another outrageous claim. And you would say, you see that unfurling sheet of space, time, and speed? Any microsecond now, 10 to the minus 38th of a second, it is going to erupt the way that storm clouds, precipitate in drops of rain. And it's going to precipitate the very first things. And I'd say, Nick, you are crazy. I mean, you lucked out on the first one. But there's a reason they call this place where we're sitting the nothing. No thing. There never has been a thing. There never will be a thing. And the idea that things can come from a spreading sheet of space and time is preposterous. And all of a sudden, 10 to the 81th power, things come bursting, burping out of this sheet of space-time, the space-time manifold. And it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. So what have we been watching? It's the first 10 to the minus 38 seconds of the cosmos existence, a sliver so small that humans can't even conceive it, of time. And has this universe been going up or has it been going down? Has it been producing new astonishments? Or has it been sleeping on the job and swallowing its astonishments and taking them back to the nothingness? It's been making progress.
Yeah.
And that progress continues for 13.7 to 13.8 billion years until we get to now. And you read the history of the cosmos and you see the evolution of atoms, which were a brand new, astonishing invention that never should have existed, according to Aristotelian logic. And the sweepings, the grand gravitational sweepings of atoms called galaxies and stars and black holes and whole new forms of elements. When the stars died, there were only 3 elements in the early cosmos: hydrogen, helium, and lithium. And those were astonishments in themselves, supersized surprises. And you'd think that would be enough. But no, when the stars started to die, they crunched in their hearts the hydrogen, helium, and lithium nuclei together in excruciating ways. And the result was 98 new forms of atomic nuclei.
Progress.
Gold, silver, carbon, iron, oxygen, all the things we need to make us us. So has this universe, and then it gave birth to megamolecules, and those megamolecules gave birth to life, and life gave birth to you and me. Where is the stepping down here? Where is the going backwards here?
That's true.
Yeah, on the long term. So that's why I started to say at the very beginning, though this is a powerfully destructive cosmos, the inventor of death and pain, the creation in the cosmos outweighs the destruction in the cosmos by such a significant degree that the universe has been going up, 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 up ever since its beginning. It's as if it's climbing an invisible stairway. Led Zeppelin would have called it the stairway to heaven. And scientists have this idea of entropy. Everything falls apart, right? Everything's always falling apart. And it's one of the primary beliefs of modern science. It's been around for over 150 years now. It's wrong. It's all wrong. I've just given you the first flick of a vision of what the cosmos has been achieving. And where do you see the falling apart? Things fall together in this cosmos. We go from electrons and protons, which come together to form atoms. We've got atoms that come together to form galaxies. We've got atoms that also come together to form molecules. We've got atoms that come together to form macromolecules. We've got macromolecules that come together to form bacteria, the first life forms. Where is the falling down? Wow. I see a lot of falling up, but I don't see this entropy bullshit at all.
I don't either. And it's amazing. And it's like, and you can equate that with everything. Everything is progress, especially when you get into like life forms like us, primitive humans, all the way to where we are now, talking in 3 different states with ease.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you know, we are all subject to depression. We're all subject to getting up in the morning and wondering why in the world we are bothering, thinking that nobody needs us at all. We are all subject to looking at ourselves and picking ourselves apart and thinking that we're insignificant. We're all subject to falling in love with somebody and then a year into the relationship or 8 months into the relationship, going into a state of silent terror, terror we're not even allowed to admit to ourselves because we're sure we're worth shit. And that the woman that we're in love with is going to discover that we're worth shit any second now and reject us. And rejection is hideous and outrageous pain. So we're all subject to these things. And in fact, they are built into our biology. They're not built into us by capitalism. They're not built into us by industrialism. They're not built into us by by any of the Western systems. They're built into us by biology, and we can see them at work in bacteria. Bacteria are built with self-destruct mechanisms. But on the whole, when you weigh things out, most of our lives make more of a contribution than a retribution, make more of a contribution than the negative things that we do. And if we have the courage one day to put a bullet through our head, guess what happens? A whole bunch of people who relied on our existence, but whose reliance on us we never registered, we never really realized, are going to hurt for years and carry us in their heart and going to be wounded, amputated by the thought that they can never speak with us again, that they had conversations they were in the middle of with us, and suddenly, bam, those conversations are gone. This is how I feel about Michael Jackson. This is how I feel about Prince. I knew I had future conversations I needed to have with them someday. And once they died, I mean, death is more absolute than you can imagine. Nonetheless, we leave some sort of a contribution. When I was in bed for 15 years, you know this from the film, with a serious illness. And for 5 years, I was too weak to talk and too weak to have another person in the room with me. I was in solitary confinement, and solitary confinement is a form of torture beyond anything you can imagine because your body starts creating tortures. Your mind starts creating tortures that are utterly beyond belief. And when I got out of that isolation in a bedroom, and I hadn't been in touch with the world for 15 years, and I went to a coffee house I'd been hearing about, but always knew I'd never get to, called the Tea Lounge. I wondered if Michael Jackson and Prince were still alive in the hearts of my fellow human beings, because it had been 15 years and the world moves on. And I was sure that they were gone. I was sure Michael Jackson had been destroyed by all of the stories about his alleged sexual things. And Prince, you know, these are old stars, 15 years old. That's a long time. And I went out into the world and saw that the style of cars had changed dramatically. The style of decoration and lighting in shops had changed dramatically, and walked into the Tea Lounge with Prince and Michael Jackson on my mind. And I asked the first people that I met, what do you think of Prince and Michael Jackson? And I knew what they would say. Oh, those are old. We haven't thought about them for years.
Right.
No, that was not true. Their lives have been shaped by Prince and Michael Jackson. They were weak at the knees to talk to a living human being who had worked with these two guys in person, much less help shape their careers in important ways.
Yeah.
It was an astonishing thing to discover. Now, very few of us get to be Prince or Michael Jackson. But I had a friend when I was 21 years old, something like that. I had this astonishing friend, and he had red hair. He was 20 years old like I was, and he had made his first film. He'd made a film about the jazz legend Charlie Mingus, and he'd won awards for that film at the age of 20. And this friend that I just enjoyed outrageously one day put a bullet through his head. And I was furious. I was furious at him for amputating a part of me because he was such an important part of my life. And I still mourn him today. And it's over 50 years later. Absolutely. And so, but the problem is we don't tell each other that you are important to me. Yeah. We don't say that out loud. It makes us feel gawky and saccharine or something like that. It makes us feel inappropriate or unmanly.
Maybe, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I can see that.
So the lesson of that is whenever you feel appreciation for somebody, whenever you love them, whenever you really enjoy something that they've just done for you, you must tell them because they need that message to keep them alive. You know what keeps bacteria alive? Remember, bacteria are built with apoptotic mechanisms. Apoptosis is pre-programmed cell death. In other words, you know how when you were a kid, you set up a box of some sort on a stick with a string attached, and you put bait under it, hoping that a bird or an animal would come under it, and you could yank. Yeah. Well, there's a system built into the biology of a bacteria and of your cells and mine too, that is just triggered to go when the rope is pulled. And what it does is it destroys the cell. It's self-destruction, pre-programmed self-destruction. And the signal that keeps that cell from self-destructing is the expression of need from other cells. The expression that the other cells welcome it and need it. And believe me, cells give out these signals. And some of it is hugging. You know, they don't have arms, but they rub up against each other. That's one important cue that you're still needed. Or you can be in an embryo. You can be a nerve cell that's part of a traveling pack of 10,000 nerve cells traveling across the embryo to find its ultimate spot in the brain. And you need to get chemical signals of welcome from the cells that you eventually reach. Or you die. Or you do. Yeah. And we humans do the same, including you and me. So that means if you feel the slightest, if these feelings are down below here someplace, down below the level of the diaphragm or something like that, or below the level of your neck, and you have to be careful in feeling them, in looking for them, and letting them express themselves. Because the minute you feel appreciation for a brilliant sentence someone has said, a brilliant paragraph someone has said, for saving you with a little bit of advice, for just lifting you in the morning when you think you're the Walking Dead, a zombie. Yeah. You've got to open your mouth and say it. Or you've got to take your typing fingers and put them to your text message and text it or email it or something. Because if you don't, you are denying another human being the very stuff of life. And you don't want to be in the condition I was with my friend Tom, who put a bullet in his head. Yeah. You don't want to be one of those contributing through your silence to the death of somebody you find terribly important in your life.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That you put it so well. I love the way that you articulate these scenarios.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to it too. Having that bit of you stripped away from you because I had a cousin who killed herself, and to no disclosure, no nothing left behind as to what went wrong or what it could have possibly been. So it's definitely something that, yeah, I love how it's put. It's in a beautifully tragic way, So, to say the least.
Yeah.
Well, there's a higher purpose for these apoptotic mechanisms. And it's the living world is just filled with collective intelligence. Bacteria itself is made up of trillions of atoms, all cooperating together. All kinds of little structures in the bacteria cooperating together. And the bacteria has its own intelligence. Or what one of my partners, the Eshel Ben Jacob, who was the head of the Israeli Society of Physicists and the head of the condensed matter physics department at the University of Tel Aviv. And he used to call it computational intelligence. Okay, so an individual bacterium has computational intelligence. But bacteria live in groups of roughly 7 trillion. And a colony of 7 trillion bacteria can cover my hand, but be so thin that you and I would never know it was there. Mm-hmm. And those 7 trillion are constantly communicating via chemical messages. And together they form a computational intelligence, a group brain, what Eshel used to call a creative web. Wow. Because if push comes to shove, they can re-engineer their genome. But here's how it works. In neural nets, the things that are used in supercomputers, in a neural net with a Darwinian algorithm, the Darwinian algorithm operates by having gazillions of modules, and each of those modules is built so that when it is contributing to the solution at hand, a solution to the problem at hand, it is juiced. It has the equivalent of exuberance. It is given it gets popularity, it gets lots of connections to other modules, lots of influence over those other modules, and lots of resources, lots of electricity that juice it. When it is not contributing to the solution of the problem at hand, it does the opposite. It shuns connection.
Wow.
And it is shunned in turn. And it goes into a very low level energy state if it lives at all. And it's through the combination of all these modules built with this, if I am necessary, I'm going to thrive. And if I'm not necessary, I'm going to die circuits that makes a collective intelligence. It makes each module like a neuron in a brain. And you and I and Josh are neurons in a collective brain, a collective intelligence. And we are built with the same basic algorithm. If I'm needed, I thrive. If I'm not needed, I die. That's built into bacteria. And it makes us a part of a group IQ. And we live on the basis of the power of our group IQ. Because the smartest groups are constantly in competition with each other. They're in competition with each other to see who's number one. Look at China and the United States right now.
Yeah.
Well, this has been going on for as long as there have been human groups, and humans can't live without groups. Humans are group animals.
Yes.
So that means this has been going on for as long as we've been human. And since we made our first stone tools roughly 3.1 million years ago, this may have been going on for 3.1 million years. And our depressions and our anxieties and the fact that we study for 3 weeks for a math exam, and then when we get into the classroom, when we open the test book, our mind goes totally blank. We can't even remember 1 + 1 = 2. All of these self-destruct mechanisms are built into us to make us modules of a collective intelligence and group IQ. And whether you're number one or whether you're on the bottom matters. Imagine being a part of a tribe in the Orinoco Valley or the Amazon rainforest today. And there are ranchers who have modern Western civilization and modern Western trucks and modern Western rifles and Wi-Fi, and they want your land. How likely are you to survive? But if you're American, your chances go up tremendously. In fact, your diet is better, your height is higher, your health, your longevity is better, except today, America is declining in these areas. So actually, if you are living in Holland, you're roughly 4 inches taller than you would be growing up in the United States these days. If you live in Japan, you live roughly 3 years longer than you live in the United States. And that's because we are moldering. We are standing on our laurels. The one man who is taking us into the future is not in the White House. He's not in the Senate or the Congress. He's not in Washington, D.C. at all. He's in Boca Chica, Texas. And his name is Elon Musk. And he's not even an American. Yeah. He's a South African immigrant to the United States. And he's the man we're depending on for our vision of the future.
Yep.
Because we don't have it anyplace else.
It's very obvious.
We need more competent visionaries. We need more visionaries who eat, sleep, and work and live their work, and who make the impossible come true. And we need to nourish those people more than we do right now.
I agree.
And we need to get beyond idiocy in the White House.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely true. Have you seen the movie Idiocracy? Because
no.
Okay. do you know the premise of that one?
No. What is it?
Okay, so Idiocracy is a movie where a character.
It's basically 2020 without the wonderful wardrobe.
Yeah.
So essentially, the movie. A quick little thing here is that the character is artificially frozen, and something goes wrong, and it's obviously not a realistic scenario. But he wakes up 1,000 years in the future.
Right.
And everyone is stupid.
Oh my God.
Everyone is stupid except him, and he's not even smart. He's an average dude, but he's like beyond brilliant to everybody that's living there.
Amazing.
And it's a very funny movie, and it's like this is where we don't want to go. It's a good one.
So first of all, today Rasmussen is a political polling service that's very pro-Trump and totally Republican. And it came out with the information today that 57% of Americans believe that Joe Biden is a puppet in the hands of the radical left, and he's not really a moderate at all. And only 42% disagreed with that. And I was tempted to go on Facebook and post this with a note that said, we live in a country of idiots. But the fact is, we don't, as much as idiots seem to have dominated the political system during the last 5 years, we don't live in a country of idiots. Back in around 2011, when Facebook was going strong for the first time, we had books coming out saying that the internet was dumbing down kids, that it was the shallowing of American kids. But the fact is, if you gave a Stanford Binet IQ test from 1916, the first year it was administered, to 100 average kids off the street today, those average kids would average an IQ of marginal genius, 135.
Wow.
Just average kids. Because whatever it is, this has never been, only one author that I can think of has even attempted to account for what's behind that IQ leap. Whatever it is, we have gone up 35 IQ points in roughly 100 years, 104 years.
It's incredible.
So we're a lot smarter than we give ourselves credit for. And we get caught up in demagoguery is all about not appealing. Okay, let's go into a thing called the Triune Brain. A guy named Paul MacLean came up with this. When we first started evolving, when we first came out of the sea and started living on the beach, we were reptiles. And we had a very primitive lifestyle. We laid eggs and we left them where they were and went wandering off to find more food. But we developed something that Paul MacLean calls the reptile brain, the reptilian brain. And that reptilian brain, imagine that the back of your head is like a walking stick. It's a knob at the top of the walking stick of your spine.
Ooh.
Then we got more sophisticated and we developed fur for handling thermal regulation, and we started putting out biological baby food called milk, and we started giving birth to our children in a way that required that we nurture them for a fairly long period of time. And this required whole different things of us, and we developed something that Paul MacLean calls the mammalian brain, which sort of wraps like a peach's flesh around the peach pit in our brain, that knobby walking stick it wraps around.
Yes.
And then we started to become human. and our brains grew dramatically. They went up by a factor of roughly 4. And we developed a new layer of brain to handle human things. And that layer of brain was like the peach's skin wrapped around the flesh and the pit. And Paul MacLean called that the neocortex, the human brain. So, but a demagogue works by appealing to the reptile brain and mammalian brain, not the human rational brain. And we are built, okay, so we're built to be modules in a collective learning machine, right? Mm-hmm. And a learning machine, a group, defines its boundaries, and it defines itself by who its enemies are, who it loathes. So liberals loathe Republicans. Republicans loathe liberals. The whatever it's called, intelligentsia, there it is. The intelligentsia in the United States and in Europe loathe Americans, period. And each of them has another group as an enemy. Tenements groups think landlords are monsters. Landlords think tenement groups are parasites. Each group has its enemy and defines itself by who its enemy is. So we are built with instincts to define and to view everyone around us under good circumstances as us, and to regard the others as enemies and them. That's a deep instinctual thing in us. Mm-hmm. And a demagogue bypasses your rational brain, goes directly to the us versus them part of the brain, which is more on the animal level, and can override your intelligence. So some very intelligent people that I know are total Trumpites. Mm-hmm. Total Trumpites. Now, Donald Trump, I think, has the IQ of a peach pit. He's the stupidest man I've ever seen in American politics. He has a certain cunning, and it's what the founding fathers called low cunning. And the founding fathers said, okay, we're going to get this electoral college together, right? And here's how it's going to work. If a man of low cunning comes along, who is good at making himself popular, he might be able to make it on the state level, but the other states are going to see through him. And he will never be able to make it on the national level. And the Electoral College will make sure that he never makes it. Well, how well did that work out in the election of 2016? Right. The founding fathers were wrong because they never imagined cell phones. They never imagined laptops. They never imagined the internet. And believe me, in the next 20 years, we're not going to need our cell phones and laptops anymore, because we're going to be able to do all this in our heads and transmit it when we want, or at least that's the direction that Elon Musk is going with Neuralink.
Yeah.
So since you bring that up, I have a question about that, because you're very intelligent, and I love what you do in the documentary, that you carry recorders to record your everyday life. And
oh yeah. He's gonna show us.
Are we recording? Are we being recorded?
Yes, we're recording right now.
Yeah,
awesome.
Let me check yes, we're recording.
Awesome. And I think that's so awesome. Like, honestly, I've never heard of anyone doing anything like that. And first off, I need you to send me an entire drive of that. I need that. But also, like, I wanted to know with, I think it was called Neuralink that Elon Musk is working with.
Yes, exactly.
For the little disc to be implanted into the skull. I know there was talk, he had mentioned something along the lines of like you'd be able to save state, in the sense of like almost like saving a video game. Like all your memories, your knowledge, things like that are stored into a drive, and you could essentially put your memory, basically your brain and everything, into a robotic body. Would you do something like that?
Well, I don't think, first of all, I've been coming up with a concept for the last 30 years called the ultimate chip. And this is long before Elon started at PayPal. Mm-hmm. And the concept was, okay, you get up in the morning and you head with great urgency toward the bathroom. And on your way to the bathroom, you have this brilliant, astonishing idea. And it's so important that you know it's going to last. And you like your bladder is not going to allow you to go to a pad and paper and write it down. So you rush into the bathroom, sure that this thing is monumental and there's going to be no problem remembering it. And by the time you exit the bathroom, it's gone. You don't even remember what subject it was about. It's just totally and completely gone. So what you want is something where, as you said, Josh, you can say save, and it will save that. Not only that, it'll bring it back to you when you're doing something to which it is relevant in the future. So that you can start stringing together old thoughts that otherwise would be totally gone from your brain, even if they are saved. So the ultimate chip would also do this. So you've flown into Detroit for a business meeting. You're all by yourself. You check into the hotel, one of the loneliest experiences in the world. You are lonely as hell. You go down to the bar hoping for company. But you are as if you were in a self-enclosed capsule, and everybody else in the bar is as if they're in a self-enclosed capsule, and it simply doesn't work out. Yes, you see tons of other lonely people, but you do not make any social connections. Okay, the ultimate chip is going to tell you not just what the names are of all the people in the bar, and a little capsule biography of each of them, and suggest an opening line to start a conversation with each of them. But it's going to concentrate on those you would find most interesting first, so it doesn't waste your time.
Wow.
It can even...
Is there a privacy blocker though? So like nobody can just like come in and read about me?
Well, in the old days, 30 or 40 years ago when I started coming up with this, privacy wasn't a major concern. And I've never cared about privacy in my life at all, not a bit. So I didn't think about that. But imagine that it's a busy 1 o'clock in the afternoon on 5th Avenue and 42nd Street in Manhattan. And you are walking briskly up toward 50th Street, and you are going through, people are packed 8 to 10 in a phalanx going down the sidewalk. You're just passing people by the hundreds. And there are two things you've been looking for. First of all, a girlfriend. And secondly, people that you can talk with who will understand things on your level and find what you find interesting themselves and be able to add to the conversation.
Yeah.
And the ultimate chip, if it senses one of those people in your vicinity, will tell you. And it will also tell her or him.
Someone's chipping you right now.
Yes, so that if you have the time to stop, if you're not late for a meeting, you can actually stop, and you don't have to really introduce yourselves because you'll know each other's names. But you can introduce yourselves and at least tap elbows if handshaking never comes back.
Right.
So these are the roles of the ultimate chip, to go out and find you things. There was a guy who used to come down here from Boston in the 1990s when I was locked in the bedroom. It was after I was past the 5 years of not being able to talk and the 5 years of not being able to have another person in the room with me. And he used to make pilgrimages down here. And he was hot on a topic that had been hot in the 1980s, but in the 1990s have been dropped as being of no potential relevance. And it was called artificial intelligence, AI. So he stayed in Boston. He was Russian, Alex Chislenko. He stayed in Boston because that's where the big brains of artificial intelligence of the 1980s had been. And he wanted to be able to talk to them. And his concept was, you would have an intelligent agent, which you own, and your intelligent agent would get to know you better and better and better and better each day. And your intelligent agent, while you were sleeping, eating, going to the bathroom, whatever you were doing, would be out on the internet, speaking to other intelligent agents, other people's intelligent agents, haggling with them, trying to find the companions that you most would want, the girlfriends that you would most would want, the products that would make your life easier given the circumstances you were under right now and the limitations of what you can and cannot understand. And it would be doing this 24/7 on your behalf. But unlike Google and Facebook, which own your personal information, it's your intelligent agent
It's yours.
that would own your personal information. A whole different concept of privacy.
It'd be a lot easier to check that I agree box if you had that, you know?
Right. And so about a year and a half ago, I was approached by a person who was putting together an artificial intelligence company. And it was based on the concepts of a complex adaptive system, a learning machine, in my second book, Global Brain. And he was hoping I would be willing to be a part of his company. And yes, so now I'm a part of his company. And I can take all these concepts that I've been noodling with for 30 or 40 years, and we can try to create them in the real world. And that's what he's raising the funding for right now. But think about that. Go back to where we started. You wake up in the morning and you don't know why you're bothering to wake up because you're sure we're of no use to anyone on earth. To hit the age of 76, and so I'm now 77. And I'm 77 and I'm the youngest 77 you ever saw in your life, except there are probably others who are even younger than I am at 77. But I do 1,250 of these things that I called push-ups until I saw the footage in the film. Now I have to call them vibrational plankings. They're not quite push-ups. They're like vibrations in midair. I do 1,250 of these things on a normal morning. And I walk 6 miles a day on a normal day, because you can get all kinds of work done while you're walking these days. So for me, I used to call this friend. I had a friend in his 70s. I was much younger than that in those days. And I used to tell him, every day you wake up is the first day of the most important 20 years of your life. And then one day it occurred to me to look up when he was born. And I looked it up on Wikipedia, and he was 78 years old when I was lecturing him like this. I'm going to be 78 in June. His name was Buzz Aldrin. And he really needed those lectures. He really, really, really needed to hear that message. Well, now I'm about to be 78. And believe me, every day I wake up is the first day of the most important fucking 20 years of my life. And when somebody comes to you with one of your ideas and wants to build a company around it, that gives you a reason for waking up in the morning.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It gives you those chemical signals of being welcome.
Yep.
That welcome. Bacteria.
Yes. The bacteria.
You're a true fucking marvel, because I mean, you go from chronic fatigue syndrome and 15 years in bed, just, I mean, I can't even begin to imagine what that's like, or let alone the mental torture that you yourself had probably put yourself through, as I would have done the same. I can't imagine. And you, first off, like, you accomplished so much in your time before that, like well over somebody else's lifetime of achievements. And then you take we'll call it a 15-year bed break, and you come back and you completely reinvent yourself, and
you're getting shit done whilst being in bed too.
Still accomplishing like plenty of many lifetimes worth of work. While I was in bed,
I wrote 3 books, and I founded 2 international scientific groups. And one of the groups totally changed the perception in science of something called, this is in evolutionary biology, of something called group selection. Totally. From a bed.
Insane.
And how, when you, like you reiterating your achievement, how do you feel? Like, what goes through your mind when you say that?
Well, in
badass.
in 1995, my first book was about to come out, The Lucifer Principle, and I had to write a biography. And it took me days, because I have a hard time remembering all of my life at one time. And when I finished, I thought, no one is ever going to believe this. I don't believe this. This sounds like the ravings of a lunatic. because, I started in science at the age of 10. I started reading 2 books a day. I got really serious about it. I even bought books or got books from the library on on industrial processes, and made my own cold cream from scratch. The stuff your mother uses to get the makeup off her face at night. And at 12, I built my first Boolean algebra machine. I co-designed a computer that won some science fair awards. I was schlepped off to a meeting with the head of the graduate physics department at the University of Buffalo. The head of the graduate physics department. What head of a graduate physics department wants to spend any time with a 12-year-old? And we ended up in his office for an hour discussing the hottest controversy in science at the moment, which was Big Bang versus steady state theory of the universe and the interpretation of the Doppler shift. And he came out of his office and he put his hand on my shoulder and he said to my mom, "You don't need to save for grad school for him. He'll get fellowships in theoretical physics at any school he wants."
Yeah.
Which unfortunately gave me the impression that my parents had to save for grad school for me. But that's another problem. And my mom, who was super brilliant, she didn't really care to spend any time with me, but she would occasionally pull off these astonishments. Mm-hmm. And she got the head of the research and development department for the valve company that made the valves for the Bell X-1, the first plane to break the sound barrier, and the Bell X-2, the first plane to take humans to the edge of space. And she got him to give me private lessons in outside the box science. This is the fucking age of 12. At the age of 16, at the age of 16, I mean, when you don't have any friends, so you don't have any social life, apparently you got a lot of time to do other things.
It helps sometimes. I mean, shit. Man, you're on the Mindless Morning Show, so the hosts here were pretty damn mindless for quite a while. We're learning a lot, though, now. We're getting a little better.
So there I am at 16. God knows what happened in the intervening years. And I'm working at the world's largest cancer research lab. And they put a legitimate scientist over my head to make sure I don't break too many multi-million-dollar machines, because I really am clumsy. And I am fascinated. What really happens is not the work that I'm doing in biochemistry or in immunology. What's bothering me is there's this problem called the charge parity and time problem. And it goes really simplified. It goes like this. If matter and antimatter are created in equal amounts at the same time, where's all the antimatter? And it took me 2.5 months to solve that problem. I put together this discussion group. I mean, it wasn't putting it together. It sort of fell together around me, that met during lunchtime in the cafeteria and then got so into what it was, the brainstorming it was doing, that we went out to a friend's house and brainstormed until 1 or 2 in the morning. And at the end of the summer, I had this theory of the beginning, middle, and end of the universe that predicted something that wouldn't be discovered for 38 years. And the guys who would discover it would get Nobel Prizes for it. It was called dark energy. And when I finished the summer, I threw the theory away because I was sure it was comic book science. It was so simple that it couldn't possibly be serious. But it predicted dark energy, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
And it's the only theory I know that actually explains what dark energy is to this very day. So if you go on Google and you look up YouTube, Howard Bloom, Big Bang, you'll see a 5.5-minute animation that explains the whole theory. 5.5 minutes.
And I'm going to. It's amazing, yeah.
So I've been doing this ridiculous stuff my whole friggin' life. And that's why when I put together a biography, I didn't believe it. I thought it was the ravings of a lunatic. Because, I mean, among other things, how do you go from all of this stuff? And also, I was kidnapped in my junior year at Reed College. First of all, I dropped out of school for 3 years and helped found a movement accidentally, because the movement formed around me. I didn't form the movement. And then I left the country, and when I came back, Time Life Publications had come up with a name for it. They called it the Hippie Movement. So the story of that is in my book, How I Suddenly Started the 60s. which Timothy Leary said was a monumental masterpiece of American literature and filled with nonstop scientific comedy routines and woo-wah, aha experiences. And he compared it to the work of James Joyce, which is amazing because that turned out when he died to be his favorite author, according to the obituaries. So I was just staggered.
Wow.
I didn't believe that Timothy Leary had actually written this thing. I wanted to get this book. There I am laying in bed, right? I haven't been able to talk for 5 years. I knew from my own research that, like the bacteria that goes into apoptosis when it doesn't get social contact, that without social contact, I would die. And to get social contact, I thought, okay, when you're sick, what do you put out? I have a friend named Val Geist. He's this amazing evolutionary biologist. And he says all communication signals boil down to two things: attraction cues and repulsion cues. Now, he was talking about animals, but that turns out to be true for the entire universe, all the way up and all the way down. And when you're sick, what do you put out? Attraction cues or repulsion cues? You put out repulsion cues because you're moaning and groaning about your problem and you're genuinely scared. Yeah. So my job was to put out attraction cues. And how was I going to do this? So I had these stories of all the things that had happened to me in the 1960s in accidentally helping found a movement. And they were hilarious stories, and they were part of my oral vocabulary. You know, I tell them to somebody. I told them to one girl, and it took 3.5 hours and kept her up until dawn. And she was still fascinated. Unfortunately, that's the only thing she was fascinated with, my stories, not me. But one way or the other, so I decided, okay, I'll write the stories down. And because I'm so sick, the only things that can lift me out of this terrible depression are two things: P.G. Wodehouse, the humorist, the one who came up with Jeeves, and Dave Barry. So I will try to write in the style of Dave Barry and P.G. Wodehouse. So I did that to the best of my ability and sent out these comic episodes by snail mail in those days. I had an assistant in the house, and I did them on the computer, but she was translating them to snail mail and sending them out. And indeed, I had 2 or 3 friends that I got this way who stuck with me through this illness. But by the time I was finished telling all the stories, I had a book. And when I got, the thing from Timothy Leary seems very unlikely, right? But what happened is I had this book. I wanted to sell it. To sell it, I wanted some blurbs, some things that said how people responded to the book. And so the first people I thought of were the Jefferson Airplane, because they had been iconic bands during the period of time that I was writing about. So a friend of mine had started out in the music industry as their roadie. So I probably snail mailed him and asked him if he could get the manuscript to the Jefferson Airplane. And he said, no, I've got a better idea. Send me the manuscript. So I sent him the manuscript, big, fat, heavy manuscript, in the days when we really had to rely on heavy-duty printers if we were authors, because 18 people might ask for copies of the manuscript. It's a lot of paper. And I sent him the manuscript, and 2 or 3 weeks later, I got back this astonishing quote. And it said that it was from Timothy Leary, because my friend was managing Timothy Leary. And I didn't believe it came from Timothy Leary, because it was so wild and ecstatic in its praise. So I thought my friend had written this to be kind to me, and that he had gotten Timothy Leary's permission to put Leary's name on it. And 10 years later, when I was still stuck in my bedroom, a friend of mine, Douglas Rushkoff, the author, and an artist from San Francisco who had spent the last 6 months of Tim Leary's life with him, sitting next to his bed, comforting him, uplifting him to the best of their ability as he was dying of prostate cancer. These 2 friends came into my bedroom where I was laying, prostrate with my illness. And in those days, I had a printer set up next to my bed, so that anything I wrote, I could print. And I printed out the quote, and I handed copies to each of them. And they sat there in a very weird, dead silence. And I knew exactly what that silence was about. They were trying to figure out how to let me down without hurting me too much. They were trying to figure out how to tell me this couldn't possibly be Timothy Leary. And then they finally opened their mouths.
Yeah.
And the whole room changed. And they said, "This is Tim." And there were tears
Oh,
in the
wow.
corner of their eyes. And they'd been so silent, not because they were trying to figure out how to let me down without hurting me. They'd been so silent because it brought Tim back in those last 6 months, watching him die, back into their lives. So it was Timothy Leary. And it took me another year to realize I had written in the style that had lifted me out of my illness, the humor of P.G. Wodehouse and the humor of Dave Barry. But of course, I don't write like them. I have a whole different vocabulary, a whole different sensibility. So it came out as something different, something new.
Neat. Yeah.
Yeah. And when had it reached Timothy Leary? When he was as sick as I was.
Oh, wow.
When he knew he was dying. When he needed something to lift him the way that Wodehouse and Barry had lifted me.
Exactly.
And apparently that's what it had done. And the realization was chilling. One man sick in a bed, trying to write something ecstatic, trying to write something on a level way beyond normal reality that succeeds in lifting another man in a bed out of his misery and into that realm, that ecstatic realm,
Yeah.
for as many hours as it took to read the book. And that, I think, is why the quote from Timothy Leary was so utterly astonishing.
And yeah, and real, and that's amazing.
Yeah.
I just can't wait to go and get all your books, because I mean, I'm clearly missing out on life.
Well, I hope they do wonderful things for your life. I mean, because of the movie, Josh, in the movie, you see me signing a will with a guy in Dubai who's been a faithful, loyal, true fan for, at that point, 15 years. And I'm willing him the building that I live in and own that keeps me alive, so that we can found a Howard Bloom Institute.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a bunch of people, after seeing the film, came to me and said, "We want to be part of the Howard Bloom Institute."
I do too. Sign me up.
Yeah, well, then you should email me and remind me, and I'll tell you our next meeting is coming up. I think today is Friday. It's coming up a week from today at 10 o'clock in the morning Eastern time, because the people in the group are in Germany, in London, in LA, in Pennsylvania, and in New York. And we have to have a time that fits everybody's schedules,
Oh, yeah.
which is tricky. So
I can only imagine.
So you can come into a meeting, Josh, if it interests you. These are deadly serious people.
I think like my heart just sank for a moment when you said that I could actually come into me. I'm totally down for it. I just can't believe I'm actually offered the opportunity.
Well, you'll be impressed by the people. They are really superb. And
I'd imagine so.
So, and again, all of us are fleas on this planet. All of us do have that experience of waking up and feeling totally unnecessary to anybody.
Yep.
And these things are beginning to arrive at this time of my life that are beginning to make me feel just a little bit more necessary when I wake up in the morning. And frankly, and I also, there's another thing that's happened. For the last 20 years, even when I was sick as a dog in bed and could still just begin to talk, I started appearing on a show called Coast to Coast AM.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the highest rated overnight talk radio show in North America. It's on 545 stations. And in the days when I first began, it was a guy named Art Bell, who was a monumental figure in talk radio. And he was amazing. He was just amazing. He could energize you unbelievably. And one night I was laying here in bed. I was very sick, but I could talk. And I had discovered that my brain works best when I chill the room down to 68 degrees. So I had the room down to 68 degrees, and I was literally shivering when I got a preliminary call from Art Bell on the phone. And I made the mistake of saying, I'm not well and I'm shivering. And Art said, oh my God, we booked you for 5 hours. Maybe we shouldn't have booked you. I said, no. You made the right decision. And then I proved it with 5 hours. So now Coast to Coast has me on every week, Wednesday night, 1:06 in the morning. And when you know that you are going to be that wanted every single week, you stop waking up with that feeling that nobody wants you. And I have a girlfriend who loves me, and when she tells me she loves me, and we're electronic, we're totally electronic. It's the age of COVID. You can't meet anybody in person these days. When the COVID thing started, and she was in Baltimore and I'm in New York, and she told me, well, Baltimore is just a short bus ride away. And that sounded good. But then, of course, COVID made that just as impossible as if she were on another planet. But when she tells me she loves me and she gives me a kiss, I can be in the dourest of all possible moods. I can think that our relationship isn't a good relationship. And all of a sudden, it's as if a column of light, the thickness of a Roman supporting column or a Greek supporting column on the Pantheon, comes down from the sky as if there were laser beams up there, making this solid beam of light, goes through my body and fills me with joy.
Yes.
And it's only in the last 10 or 15 years that I've even discovered joy. That word didn't make any sense to me until the last 10 or 15 years.
I
now I know what it means.
I don't know if you're going to feel like a shining ray of light or just like that annoying pesky red laser, but Howard, I fucking love you, man. Like I think your existence is so crucial to the fucking world. And I mean,
well, bless you for saying that, because I'm an insignificant flea. And I need that.
I don't believe that whatsoever.
No, I don't.
But I have to ask, because I thought one of the funniest things in that documentary, you're flipping through Tinder. Is your girlfriend from Tinder?
Now, that girlfriend was the love of my life, and I flew her to New York City. I don't do that kind of thing, and I don't have the money to do that kind of thing. I live off of a very tiny income, but I flew her to New York. And even though I've had 2 marriages, this was the first fucking honeymoon I've ever had in my life. It was amazing. One day I took her on things that are standard for New Yorkers allegedly, but really aren't. We all take these things for granted and we never do them. So one day I wanted to take her on a horse and buggy ride all the way up to 110th Street at the very top of Central Park and right next to Harlem. And then all the way back down to the bottom of the park again, because the northern half of the park is designed by my favorite park designer, Frederick Olmsted. And it's terribly different from the rest of the park. And it's pseudo wild. It's very different from the more formal parts of the park. And I wanted her to see it. Well, none of the guys with horses and buggies would take us that far. They wouldn't go further than 82nd Street. So we found a driver who pedals a cab, who was willing to take us, and he was wonderful. He was joyful. He was an African with this, just joy oozed out of him at every pore, and we were in a totally joyful state. And it was late in the afternoon, so the sun was shining with that golden light that makes everything just a little bit better. Yeah. And we did the whole circuit of the park. And when we got off of that jitney or whatever it's called, people looked at us as if we were surrounded by a halo. And the people who looked at us started beaming because we were radiating joy, absolutely radiating joy. So she probably will be the love of my life forever. But then I went to South Africa to spend time with her. Once I was scheduled to go again, and COVID came up, and I couldn't take the second trip. And she brought in a live-in boyfriend, and And so I have a different relationship. I immediately went on Facebook and said, I need a girlfriend. And believe it or not, I mean, my rationale was on Tinder, nobody you approach has any idea of who you are. Right. And even Tinder doesn't tell them very much. Mm-mm. But people who are your friends on Facebook follow you.
Yeah.
They actually find you to be of some value. Yep. And over the course of the months and the years, they get to know you. So if one of the females, I mean, I avoid saying yes to friends who are female on Facebook because so many of them are artificial females who are, scams.
Right.
Nonetheless, I went on, in order to find my first girlfriend, the one who was the love of my life, I went on Facebook because my girlfriend had died. And I said, I need a girlfriend. And a whole bunch of trolls, I have lots of trolls, a whole bunch of trolls jumped on me and said, man, you don't do this on Facebook. This is totally inappropriate. Do this kind of thing on Tinder. And I got a private message from a woman saying, I understand why you're doing this on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And she ended up being the love of my life.
Yeah.
That woman. So you really do meet the people who have some idea of who you are in your friends list on Facebook. So when the love of my life swapped me out for a live-in boyfriend, I can see why she did it. She needed somebody finally who'd be there, who'd make dinner for the kids and would help her sustain the household and would be there in her bed at night and all that kind of stuff instead of a cyber presence. I went on Facebook again and I got 6 candidates and I went through the 6 candidates and I settled on one who just seemed to enjoy the hell out of me. Mm-hmm. And we've been together ever since and I spend the days with her. She's normally online with me the whole time that I'm working, right up until, we're together. And no, we're together overnight. I mean, I don't hang up on her. We go to sleep with the phones next to us at night so we can wake up and find that each other are there if the phone company hasn't yanked the connection. So, but the things, I mean, one of the advantages, there were many advantages. I know this is hard to believe. There were many advantages to that 15 years of illness. It was horrible. It was monstrous. It was every kind of torture that you can't imagine.
Yeah.
But it provided an awful lot of benefits. And one of them was, it took me 3 years to realize I struggled to go to my desk in the front of the house every single day that had my favorite office chair that I had commanded during the days of the Howard Bloom organization, LTD, the leading PR firm in the music industry. And at first, if I worked my way up by 15 minutes a day, I was able to get up to 9 hours of work sitting at that desk. Couldn't talk, but I could work. Yeah. And then it was after going, and then I would crash and have to start all over again for 15 minutes and work my way up. And then I'd be able to work my way up to 8 hours, and then only 6 hours, and then only 4 hours, and then only an hour and a half. And something finally occurred to me. Bloom, you idiot. You have a limited amount of energy. This is like having coins in a piggy bank. And you are spending that energy trying to sit up. Forget it. Get your assistant to set up 2 computers next to the bed, because in those days, 2 computers had less power than your cell phone has right now.
Yep.
And with a Chinese box that allows you to control both computers from one monitor and one keyboard, and lay there. Don't try to sit up. And guess what happened? Eventually, my voice started to come back.
Yeah.
Because that's what had been taking the energy, trying to sit up that I would have used talking. And I had no sense of humanity. When your sense of your future is as vividly inside of you as your shadow is behind you. And when your sense of future disappears, you no longer feel human. You no longer feel you have a place on the map of humanity.
Yeah.
And that means you have to reconstruct your humanity, which meant I had to reconstruct my humanity in the only realm where I could walk about. And that was the cyber world.
Yep, exactly.
And one of the first things that I discovered, my wife, after 6 years of trying to support me and help me, after 3 years, she started to leave me. And then she divorced me. And it was cruel and it was vicious, and I tried to kill myself. But when I started looking for female companionship online, I discovered something astonishing, that we are all stuck with bodies that are totally accidental. If we are stuck in a 400-pound body, that's not because we chose it.
Yeah.
That's what landed on us. If Nick, if your face is different from Josh's, that's not because you chose to look different. It's because that's the way you came out looking, period. And you were stuck.
Sucks to be you, Nick.
Yeah, I know.
But I realized that souls get together online. You don't see the accidental body of the other person.
Yeah.
You
Yes,
see who that
exactly.
person really is. And in a sense, cyber love is more authentic than in-person love.
Now, I just want to ask, you do know of like the term catfishing and all that too, right?
Well, yeah, there was snarky stuff going on.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure.
Right.
Always got to watch out for that.
And you have to watch out for that, and the women have to watch out for that too. So when it comes to COVID time, and through accidents of fate, I am stuck with a girlfriend that I haven't met yet, that all of our relationship has been electronic. I'm used to that.
Right. Yeah.
To me, that's not an artificial ghost. To me, that's meat and potatoes. That's real reality.
Yeah, that's where you really live. I mean, doing these interviews and talking to people that are all over the world, it's a really good place to be. A lot of times, a lot of connections are made, and
so it pays. It pays to reach your 70s. It may even pay to reach your 80s, because you end up with a platform of experience that no one has ever had before. And if you can stand on the top of that platform and reach toward the next level constantly, then all of that, which we used to consider age, is not age. It's what some cultures have considered wisdom. And it gives you insights that no one who hasn't had all of that experience could possibly achieve. So it makes you powerfully useful to society.
Yeah, absolutely. And you are, and you've achieved that, and you're still doing it. And it's extremely cool to be able to.
We're gonna make sure the world knows Howard Bloom is the fucking man. He is.
Yeah.
Well,
he is the all guiding man.
Yeah.
Well, you know that I feel like a flea. You know, I have these obligations that landed on me when I was 10.
And I can't hold that against you after being bedridden for so long. I'm sure that's like in some way ingrained in your mind, no matter what. And that's a shame, because it's far from the truth. Like, you are a living fucking marvel. Most people, even after, if they were to get up again, they probably wouldn't see fit to continue and accomplish anything near what you've accomplished. So, I mean, you're a pretty mighty fucking flea if you want to be a flea.
Well, there's this research on people with disabilities, people who've, lost an arm, lost a leg, almost lost their lives. And it shows that those people who've been through the horror of this kind of enormous loss have an appreciation for life that is so much sharper than the appreciation of people who've never been injured in that way, never been threatened in that way, that it defies belief. So in its own awful, strange way, the illness was a gift.
The destruction created something new.
Exactly. It all rolls together with the universe, with bacteria, with how vast things are, with how microscopic they are, and everything in between. And
Josh, you've got the perfect metaphor, and it is when stars died. What happened at their hearts, where they were torturing the nuclei of hydrogen, helium, and lithium? They were generating iron, carbon, silicon. Gold, platinum, all of the elements that we take for granted today. And if dying stars could do it, then it's our job to do it.
Yep.
But without the torture, without the injury, without the death.
That's the best way, and also the best way to like another way you were talking about, like whenever you lost your girlfriend and then you went out to find another one. My method to get my wife was actually pretty interesting.
Oh, what'd you do?
So, do you remember earlier we were talking about like the big box and the string thing?
Yeah.
Boom.
You were talking about a big box and a string. Oh, that big box.
Yeah, like
yes, I would. Because
that's how I got.
That's astonishing. But you did it in real life with dinners at TGF Fridays or whatever it's called and stuff like that, right?
In a way, yeah.
Tell me the story.
Okay, well, it's actually somewhat interesting, I guess you could say. We met in high school, but we didn't really know each other that well. And then after high school, we started talking a little bit, and we got together and ended up getting pregnant with who is now our 9-year-old.
Wow.
And, and so we ended up like, oh, we're having a baby. I guess I should probably know more about you and vice versa. Let's just see what happens. Like, let's go for it. Let's try to, because like she was pregnant with Ava, my 9-year-old, before we had even said like I love you. Like we weren't even.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so we were like, let's
sloppy family planning.
We get along, we get along really well though. We were like, we got this. Like we can try, And I mean, we've been together for over 10 years now.
Oh, that's fantastic.
3, so
amazing.
Yeah, I know. It worked. It worked out well.
Well, it's the joy thing. I mean, joy is one of the hardest things because there's an old Bloomism. There are lots of Bloomisms. And one of them is never throw a grace away, never throw a blessing away, never throw a grace away. It's very similar to that. Every time you feel a sense of appreciation for somebody else, you better damn well tell them or you may lose them.
Yes.
And even if you just lose them to depression, that's your fault because you haven't told them how much they mean in your life.
You didn't do your part.
Right. Joy, I think, is much harder. As I said, I didn't really understand the meaning of the word until maybe 6 years ago or something like that.
Yeah.
It took me 92 years or 72 years to experience it for the first time. But when you experience it, you cannot deny it. It is there. It gives meaning to the word. It is a thing on its own, and it's the greatest of graces. So if you find graces, if you find blessings, if you find joys, gather them the way you would gather flowers for a bouquet.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
And I gotta say, I love how you take the moment to like greet every dog that you go by. I know your beautiful love and passion for dogs, and that was something that we were sitting there just watching, and I was like, I love that because not only like are you getting something out of that, like because I mean,
unconditional love.
Yeah, dogs obviously like they love the pet, and no matter who it's coming from, but the owners too, like just being around somebody of your energy, like that's going to put a smile on their face, and that's going to make that day so much better for them. Like, so I mean, you're doing just as much as that dog is doing for you. I don't think you realize that. No,
I don't. I haven't thought about it that way until this instant, until you just said it.
It's true.
There you go. I mean, that is something you were doing.
Homeowners, because the owners are like, oh yeah, like this is so cool. Like, thank you for doing that, and then they will leave and they're happy.
Your energy of just being happy, smiling, petting the dog. That if somebody doesn't smile to that, there's like deeper issues there. Like you can easily put a smile on somebody's face with just your energy.
And just think, for the first 55 or 60 years of my life, I was clinically depressed. I was depressed every second of every minute of every day. So you too can get beyond this.
It kills me to know that like you had to deal with such suffering, but I do know, and I mean, in a weird, hopefully not too sadistic way, I'm glad it happened because it's to a sense where you're at where you're at now, and you wouldn't be who you are without that experience and that endeavor. And I don't think I would want a Howard Bloom any other way. You're again,
Well,
not to sound sadistic. It's a shame you had to deal with that, but I mean, you are an amazing person.
Well, I was lucky to have all these experiences, and I was lucky to be given whatever it is that takes these experiences, like the Philosopher's Stone, and turns them from tortures into treats, from tortures into treasures. I'm just fucking lucky that exists inside of me. I didn't choose it. It's in there. I can't help it. And I'm so lucky it's there.
But you're helping to share it. But you're helping to share it too.
Yeah, you're lucky you got it. But you in all of your millions of microbes, your bacteria, you consumed it. You destroyed it. You made it something new, and you did it. I know you like to say half of the microbes don't identify as you. They identify as bacteria and things like that, and only so few. But you yourself and all it, dude.
Well, I hope the bacteria down there in huge colonies are enjoying being a part of me. I hope you get to read all the books, or even just one or two, and that you get back in touch and let me know what they are. But I will be seeing you before then, because you're going to send me an email. And do you want my email address? I can.
So we'll go ahead and end this episode here, and we'll talk to you after we end it. So everyone, that was Howard Bloom. I hope you all enjoyed this amazing man. Check out his documentary.
Einstein, Michael Jackson, and Me: A Search for Soul in the Power Pits of Rock and Roll.
Yes. The new book he's had. Check out all his books, honestly, because we all need them. We just all need them. And if you haven't figured that out, you're
every single thing that Howard wants us to get out there to the world will be in the description of everything.
Yeah, all links to everything.
Spotify, YouTube, you guys know by now. We're on everything. The descriptions, everything will be there.
Yep. So
and HowardBloom.net, the website.
Yes, and Howard, thank you so much. Thank you so much for spending your time with us.
I know. Well, anytime you ever want to come back to, we're always here.
Great. Well, thank you for the energy you give me.
Absolutely.
Anytime.
Stay mindless, folks.
Thank you guys for tuning in to the Mindless Morning Show. We hope you enjoyed it, and we greatly appreciate you guys picking us out of the many great podcasts out there. Now go enjoy your mindless day.